Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in. I'm Robbie.
I'm Jason.
And welcome to the table. We are so excited to have you guys here for episode 19, y'all. I'm always about bringing people behind the curtain, Jason. And we are recording this early because at the time that this drops, I will probably be napping at Jason's house for our light afternoon nap before heading into the games for the evening.
Yep, this is true. I'll be joining you on those naps too. That's a new thing for me because I expect the same because I'm trying to get back into working out. So I'm getting up early. So that week I need to still get up early. But if we're up late, I'll be doing that. I thought about that today. I'll be doing that 4 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock nap till 5:30. Then I'm ready to go for game night every night.
Absolutely. Well, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, man. I am doing well. Life is good. I'm a blessed man. Talked to the bosses today and got some more guidance on future responsibilities. So that's exciting. So of course, that's always awesome. How you doing, brother?
Dude, hey, doing swell. I got to spend the day on the content creation side. When I joined Foundation, which is a disc golf company, for those of you who are just board gamers out here, part of my joining is that I got someone to edit my stuff, which is wonderful because that frees up multiple work days for me, doing 2 videos a week. And so today I got to be much more of like a social presence is how I kind of spent the work day, hanging out with people, talking with people, and being a massive extrovert. That's the dream. Any day that I get to do that, it is so exciting. But speaking of dreams, Jason, recently you got to go on a game night spree this past week. Yeah,
it's crazy. So like Robbie said, technically we're recording this 1 week apart. First time we've done 1 week apart. But in that week, I've played 11 different games. And I've only one night I haven't played a game, and it was literally last night. Liz and I didn't play a game. We're catching up on Fallout. Little dark, but really good show. I'm loving it so far. So, okay. But and for our disc golf listeners, I had a swanky disc golf night, a foundation with swanky disc golf night, and they had the overthrow guys over as well. So I had like the disc golf universe here playing board games every night. So had a lot of really good ones I've talked about before. Quacks, taught the swanky guys Quacks and For Sale. Not Quacks, played Quacks with Dakota from Overthrow, taught the Swanky guys Wormspan and For Sale, but those are not the 2 games I want to talk about tonight. I'm actually going to talk about party games. I know, I rarely talk about party games because they're just not, I have fun with them, but if you ask me, I'm always going to choose that heavy, crunchy thing that's going to take like 3 hours, right? So we had a game night in which we played 4 different games, but the 2 ones I'm going to highlight are Green Team Wins and Wits and Wagers. I'll start with Wits and Wagers because I looked back through our previous games we've talked about, and I've talked about Wits and Wagers before. But the gist of Wits and Wagers is essentially like a trivia game in which over 7 rounds, a question is going to be answered. A question will be asked of everybody. That's a single answer. Like, how deep is the Atlantic Ocean? Everybody puts down their answer. You put it out, and then you put it in ascending order, left to right. And one side has red, one side has black, and like odds based on those spaces. And then you're betting on who was the closest to it without going over. So if the actual answer is 2,500 feet and someone bet 2,000 feet or wrote 2,000 feet and somebody wrote 2,600 feet and you think 2,000 is right, you bet on that. That's how you win, right? That's how you win that round with your monies. It's a gambling game, not with real money, so we're okay, right? Yeah. And so over 7 rounds, you play this game, and it's one of those party games that have never not hit. It always hits well, plays really well. From 5 to 7, 4 is okay, but it goes to 7, and in that 5 to 7 range, it's always great. And so we just had a good time with it. I would say this, I had to say at the very last, it was an epic finish. So no one was blowing out with money. Things were really tight. Things were really close from guest to this guest. We missed a lot of guesses. There were some Star Wars guesses. There were some Sound of Music ones, some really good pop culture one. But the last question was fantastic. So the last question was, what year was the first animated film nominated for a Best Picture Oscar? Now, I knew what the answer was. I knew what the movie was. Let me clarify that. Knew what the movie was, 100%. I'm a movie guy. And then I was like, oh, what's the year? I was thinking back to my high school days. It's this or this. It's this or this. And I went with a year. I went with 1992. Put it out there. And like everybody could tell, they just knew I knew what I was talking about. So everybody bet on 92 except Swanky Luke. Swanky Luke bet on the previous one, which was 1947. And right before I read the answer, he goes, man, if it's 1991, I'm going big. And I read Beauty and the Beast, 1991. So I was off by 1 year. 1 year. And we all lost our money. And Swanky Luke went $51,000 or $51, whatever it is. Yeah. He won big. And I was like, and everybody had bet all in because nobody really had a lot of money. But that was an epic finish to that game for sure, for him to come away with that win and be 1 year off, because I knew it was Beauty and the Beast right away, and I could not think which year it was because I was a senior in high school, or as close to me being a senior in high school. And I wanted to go look up the semantical arguments of like, well, was it when it was released or when the Oscars were? I didn't even do that. But that was Wits and Wagers. Have you and I played Wits and Wagers together? I think we've played once, right?
So I don't think I've ever played Wits and Wagers with you, but I have Wits and Wagers as well. We have different versions.
Right. We have the Vegas edition.
One. Yeah. And I think we just have like Party Edition or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
Like it's very broad trivia. I would imagine the Vegas has more pop culture mixed in, because like as you're saying that, I was like, I've never seen a pop culture question.
Oh wow! Okay, yeah.
But my favorite part of Wits and Wagers is we have a friend. It's an inside joke. We bought it when I was in college, and we still to this day make fun of my friend Courtney for this, because she was like, "Oh, we should play Wits and Waggers," and I'm like. Courtney, I don't think that's what it's called. But truly, it's so locked into my brain. I know it's called Wits and Wagers, but I just, in my head, I read it that way every single time.
Yep,
so
for sure. All right. Well, so that is, I think I'll think about Wits and Waggers forever now. So I appreciate that. Courtney, was it Courtney? I appreciate that.
Yeah, Courtney.
Thanks, Courtney. So the other game we played, I don't think we've talked about before, but it's a game called Green Team Wins. Super light game. We've talked about Just One. We talked about Blank Slate, which are kind of party games. Just One, you're trying to get everybody to guess a word you're doing by doing a single word. Blank Slate, it's kind of okay, blank in a name. Well, Green Team Wins is kind of a mix of those two. It's a 15 round game, and that 15 questions are going to be asked, and everyone is guessing, privately answer what their answer is to that question. And each round, the majority of the same answer, because there's no right or wrong, right? The majority of the same answer goes to the green team. So if it says, winter foods or summer foods, your answer has to be one of those two. And then everybody flips it over, and the majority is, I'll go to the green team. There's 3 different kinds of questions. There's ones that are like that. It's like long flight or short flight or long drive. And you're not necessarily answering what your favorite thing is. You're trying to answer what everybody else's favorite thing is. There's always a multiple choice. And there's also like blank slate type one where it says blank ball or run blank. And you all had to put in one word. There's 5 of each of those questions in there. And it's another fun game. The box comes with 7 cards, but it's infinite number of people that can go in there because you're all simultaneously playing and you're just flipping over and asking a question. So much so that I had a set, and then Amazon had this like crazy cheap deal for like $5 or something. So I bought like 3 of them. So now I have at least 2 sets and some to give away as well, because it's super quick. It's easy. Anyone can play this game. There's even Wits and Wagers has a little bit, you get a little intimidated by trying to answer trivia questions. So that's not really what you're doing. It can be a little intimidating. You're like, I have no idea how long the Amazon River is or whatever, right? Well, at least in Green Team Wins, you're just choosing something off a card. And so it's another one that always hits. You score points, and the points matter, but it's more like, okay, who had fun in the game? Whereas Just One, we don't score at all. Green Team's winning. At least there's some scores. So it's a quick hit. I like Green Team Wins. Have we played that together? Like, I forget. We've played so many games together now. I forget which ones we have or haven't. Did we play Green Team Wins on one of your trips?
Yeah, we have. And it was one of those where we played it. It was like we had a large number of people. We had more than the 7, and it was just like, all right, you're finding like some. Yeah. Like, let's play it, enjoy it. It was like a nice, I think. We were trying to decide. We had the Jones were over and the McMurrays were over. And it was like, we're going to go play a game downstairs, but we don't know which one we're going to go play. And we still wanted the kids to be able to play for another game. So we played Green Team Wins. Okay. So good, dude.
Cool. Yeah, I love it.
It reminds me of Hive Mind. by Calliope Games, which is like a similar vibe of you ask a question and then there's like everyone writes down like a possible answer for that. And it's like you want to be in the majority. And so you like when you're in the majority or you've got the right number of things, you stay up higher in the hive. And then it's essentially like first one to get kicked out of the hive. So there's more of a like, if you like green team wins, but you want it to feel more like there's actually tracking of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Hive mind is a great next step.
Cool.
Because I know we have some people, right, that are like, I don't love, even in your world of like party games, and there's necessarily for me, it takes the party game vibe and turns it into a little more competition. Yeah. If that works. So like Jason said, we're filming a week apart. So I'm trying to think of nights that we have not been doing, like we've had some freedom or we've not had family in town. Since we recorded last Tuesday, my sister-in-law was there till Thursday morning. Thursday night, we were with family in Tuscaloosa. Friday night, I recorded a live podcast. Saturday night in family, Tuscaloosa. Sunday we didn't play anything. And then last night I ended up playing my other game at trivia. So not a lot of opportunities, but we did convince my sister-in-law to play a game with us, and we introduced her to Wingspan. Now I've talked about Wingspan before. Fantastic game. But here's one thing that I learned about Wingspan, and I know eventually we'll do an episode on Wingspan because there's just no way we've talked about this much and not do it. I've got to, next time I'm up, Jason, get you to teach me how you teach Wingspan.
Okay.
Because I've now taught it twice. And both times, is it just a thing where if you're playing Wingspan for the first time, you're just kind of not know for the first two rounds, like what's going on? Because that's the issue I run into both times is like players are just so overwhelmed in the first two rounds. And then finally they start to see like the pieces come together.
I think that's part of it because for hardcore gamers, mechanisms aren't necessarily, new mechanisms aren't that necessarily hard to grok. The concept of mechanism, like there's two things. There's taking actions, i.e. using mechanisms, and then the strategy of the game. I try to help people when I teach to focus on the mechanism, not the strategy. Too often they want to go to the strategy too quick. Even hardcore games, oh, slow down. Let's talk about you get a resource this way. You use a resource to play a bird. You use this to activate your bird, right? That's what you're doing. Now, the next level is the hard thing. Like you can't teach every single card. And like, well, Luke had that. Luke didn't have a problem with it, but you could see he had no problem doing the mechanisms, but he was not struggling with, because he's not a hardcore gamer the way we are, right? Or the way Reed is. So the deeper level strategy wasn't quite there for Luke, but Luke accepted. And I'm glad, like, I could see he was like, okay, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to do this. Perfect. That's what I want you to do as a new player. I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I need to do this, right? Instead of struggling with it. And so I don't, it's probably not your teach. It's just that I try. I don't always succeed, but I try to focus on the mechanism. Okay, you're going to do this for this. You're going to do this for this. You're going to do this for this, and not go too deep. And then I step back. Okay, that's the tactical. Let's step back to the strategic. Talk about why you want to do those things. When we talk, my divergent for this is like when I was teaching for sale, Will, God bless Will. Will kept trying to go very strategic. I'm like, Will, slow down, Will. Yeah. Like it's for sale. Like the second round really makes more sense than the first round, but you have to explain the first round, which makes no sense. And he kept asking questions, and Luke was laughing. I was like, we'll get there. Brother, pull it back. And then, okay, we're good. But that's kind of what I do. So,
yeah, the way I have taught it the last two times for Wingspan, and Wormspan even is like even more difficult because like Wormspan and Wingspan, if you start to realize like how you're going to build an engine and what it is, at the end of the day, you can just get there and be like, okay, I'm just going to run this over and over and over and over again. And like, as long as you're not running as long as you're not running eggs, you're not going to run out of egg spaces. So you can just kind of like do your engine over and over again. But Wormspan, obviously, you can only run the same engine 3 times in one round. So you kind of have to diversify things like that. But when I teach it, the 2 times I've taught it, I'm always like, there's 4 actions that you can take. Like there's only 4. You're going to play a bird. You're going to collect resources, you're going to lay eggs, or you're going to draw birds. And then as the game progresses, all of those actions are going to become a little more complicated because you're going to attract birds into that. And like, that's my 30,000 foot view. And people are like, yeah. And then as soon as I'm like, so when I put this bird here, this would do this. And they're like, whoa, you lost me. It's like, oh no. It's like, this is not good. So, but the other game that we played, y'all, a classic. And this is where I texted Jason when we were talking about this. I was like, you're going to judge me and laugh for this, my second game. But y'all, we're a hobby game board gaming podcast. But sometimes you just got to go back to the basics. Sometimes you just got to lean into it. I remember it was like our second or third episode, I think, of me mentioning Uno and Jason like being like, if that game had another name besides Uno, I would love it. I would be here for it. But y'all, we play Connect 4. It's so easy to play. And it's like, what it reminded me of, I can't get into chess because I know I have an addictive personality. And so I want to be a chess guy, but I know that if I got into chess, I would just be like Queen's Gambit thinking about chess all the time. So I love Connect 4 because you get that vibe. But then like there's so many little variants you can play of Connect 4 where like we literally like set it in the middle of the trivia table and it was just like one person drops in, another person drops in. One person, like you alternate, like you tag team it, but you can't communicate because there's only 4 of us.
Yeah.
So you tag team it, but you can't be like, for real, you're gonna put that there. So just a really fun throwback to a simple gaming time. And it really got me thinking, I don't know, Jason, do you know of like anything that's tried to like capitalize on the Connect 4 that is outside of the Connect 4 universe that has like that mechanic brought into hobby gaming?
I can't tell you games by name, but I know the Dice Tower has reviewed games where I've heard Tom say, this is basically Connect 4. And I don't really watch that review from a tactile game. But I will say this, there's a whole run of games called the gift games or something that have really unique names like Yinch and other things like that. They're very tactile nature, not Connect 4 proper, but it's unique shaped pieces that have unique requirements for how you move on the board, and how you move on the board will dictate those actions. I'm oversimplifying this series of games, but I've always wanted to try them because there's 2 or 3 that both Tom and Z love a lot, but it's very not quite checkers-ish, but kind of checkers-ish, kind of Othello-ish, kind of Connect 4-ish. That basic with like, you just got this piece and you can just move here. If you move here, you flip this and you take that. But then you move here and you flip this and take that. That's it. And those kind of games, I think they're called the gift games, but yeah, I know it's out there. The hobby gaming world has taking some of those mechanisms and try to make it into a heavier, crunchier game.
Well, y'all, I'm here for it. I love knowing games like that so that when you meet the person that's, hey, Jason, I'm going to host a game night. I've got games. Don't worry. Like, you don't need to bring any games. And then they describe the games and they're like, we've got Monopoly, sorry, and Uno. That should be fine. There are times where we have to put our noses down and not be so stuck up about the board games to walk in and go, hey, absolutely. I'll go back to the basics and enjoy it. But I love having those alternatives there because I think one thing that I really appreciate about getting to Jason's house as often as I do is that in my hometown, I'm the teacher of the games. And so I get to like appreciate just learning a game and playing a game sometimes. And if you are the teacher in your life or your area or your board game crew, let someone else teach a game eventually. Let someone else have that and don't look it up. Don't look up the rule man. Don't do any of that. Just soak it in and just take yourself back to the basics. Connect 4. It's the only reason I'm bringing it up. And I'm almost, instead of just being like, oh, I only played one game. It was so fun and put me in a really fun space heading into this. But we're not talking about Connect 4 today, Jason. We're talking about Clank. So talk to us about Clank.
All right, man.
What's today's game?
Today's game is called Clank, as you've already referenced. It's technically the full length is Clank, a deck building adventure. but everybody just calls it Clank because there's also Clank in Space and there's a Clank Legacy version, which we'll talk about later. But if you say Clank, people know what it's talking about. Clank was released 2006, so definitely an older. Wow, 2006. That is like 18 years ago. Is that right? Like I looked that up. Like this is probably right. There's actually now I have to go check BGG to make
Depends
sure.
when were the Oscars
2016
that year,
okay,
and when was it released?
Okay, I knew I had that wrong. It's 2016. I got what you said about the Oscars, sir. I heard. I knew 2016 wrong. Well, okay, we're getting off track here. 2016, which is still 8 years old, and if you played that, like I'm jumping ahead, but if you played it today, it would feel like it was released today. You could see maybe the art would be a little different, maybe whatever, but that game, Clank, could be released today. And you'd be like, oh yeah, totally not surprised released today. Designed by Paul Dennen, published by Direwolf, 2 to 4 player game, and depending on like so many of the games we have, depending on the number of players, will dictate whether it's like a 30 to a 60-minute game. It says 36 minutes on the board. My personal experience, even with 2 players, unless you're playing fast, is more like 40 to 70, 40 to 80 minutes. Again, we'll talk about it, but you can play the game faster or slower. I don't know if we said it yet, but Clank is a deck building game. It may have actually been on my top 10 list to start a game collection, possibly. I don't know if I said Dominion or Clank. I need to pull that up for future episodes so I can reference that and be accurate with what I said. So, but deck building game at its heart. So deck building games are games where you're going to start with a deck of cards, play those cards to take actions. In Clank, each player starts with the same 10 cards and will build their deck throughout the game. Those cards allow them to buy more cards to go into their deck. And like with most deck builders, I don't know if there's one that doesn't do this, but pretty much every deck builder, you draw 5 cards at the start of your turn, and those are the 5 cards you start to play each of your hands. Most of the cards will generate resources, and in Clank, there's 3 different kinds of resources. There's skill, which is basically on the card, it's a number, and it's what you use to buy more cards for your deck. Swords, which is looks like a sword on your card, what you use to fight monsters in the dungeon. I didn't say this yet, but Clank is a dungeon crawling game. You're basically going down into a dungeon, get some stuff, and come back out. And the last one is boots, which are essentially what you think would be is how you're moving through the cave. Those cards have the symbols are on the top left, either the number for the skill, the swords, or the boots. So you know if I have 2 boots on here, that means I can move 2 spots in the cave. If I have 2 swords, have that much strength to fight monsters as we go. As with most deck building games, each time you acquire a new card, you put it right into your discard pile, so you don't get to play at that time. When your hand runs out, you shuffle it, bring up a new set of cards, you're ready to go. What's fun about I keep saying this, but it's not uncommon with deck building games, especially ones like Clank. The longer you play that game, the more diverse your hand becomes because you have a row of cards you're looking to buy from at each into your turn. And unlike Dominion, where Dominion has 10 cards out, those are the 10 cards for the game or 12 cards, whatever it is. Clank, there's just a wide variety. There's a row of 6 you can buy. You buy it, more cards come out. And the stack of cards is pretty deep on what can come out with that. During the game, you're going to have 2 specific goals: to retrieve an artifact and escape the dragon, and then have the most points with what you gain during that game. That simple. Player with the most points wins the game. Super high level on it. Play cards, move your meeple down to the cave, grab stuff, down to the dungeon, grab stuff, get back out of the castle before the castle collapses on you or the dragon kills you. Whoever has the most points wins the game.
Yeah. I have to be the first to admit that when I was thinking and prepping about this game, because I have played this once with Jason at his house, and Jason, as I was thinking and prepping for this, I literally was like, so where do you pull the people out of the bag? Where do you do that? And I tried like so hard to work it in. And then I realized I'm thinking about Dinosaur Island when it comes to pulling people out of the bag. Like I kept trying to insert the part guess into Clank. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why am I pulling this? Because I was like, oh, that's the push your luck. Like but no, the push your luck. What's really fun about this is, as someone who I think I gave Dominion a double doozy back in the rating. That's another thing that I should like create a list and have our ratings there. But it is for Dominion. I agree with Jason that there's this really cool aspect of Dominion of like this strategy. All the data is in front of you. Like it's all there. So it's very much I'm drafting accordingly. Oh, that card's run out, so now I can't. Whereas this brings a lot more deck movement through in terms of what cards you can purchase. But like the fact that there's a board integrated with this is so cool because it's, as someone who loves Smash Up, as someone who loves Dominion, it's hard to call them, quote, board games, because for lots of people, they're going to stick their nose up and say, well, that's a card game. It's not a board game. Do you ever feel like it? Jason, you listen to a lot more like board gaming media. Is that ever a thing that people like try to push, or do we just lump them all together?
A bit of both, I guess.
Does it have to have a board?
Yeah, it's. Jason likes a board. Right. I like having a board to do things. I like having that visual aspect. Even when I play two player card building, card dueling games, I don't want to just play. I like if they have a play mat and I like the game, I'm going to buy the play mats. Totally unnecessary, right? But I'm going to buy the play mat, so I like it. So I would say it's a bit of both. Some people like it, some people don't. It lowers the cost drastically to not have a board, right? If it's just cards and you're just playing cards, wow, and you can easily get that made in America too, that's not a political statement. It's more like a functional statement. I don't have to wait a year to ship it from China. There's plenty of places in America that can make good cards for you as well. So I think, depending on who the manufacturer is and who the designer is, it'd be two different things. I prefer a board. I prefer having that ability to do those things as opposed to just playing those cards. Does that make sense? I kind of rambled a little bit there, but I think I think it depends on the player. It depends on the company.
Yeah. So it's just one thing, like I would say to me, the two most unique things about this, and I know that because did Dune Imperium come out before or after Clank? Do you know? Dune is
direct. I mean, it's after. And when we play Dune Imperium, which may not be this one, because I want to hold off because I got other games, you will see. Oh wow, same designer, same company, 100%. You'll be like, oh, this was Clank was up 1,000% the predecessor for Dune, and you'll see it easily. But it was a few years after.
Yeah. So it's just, I think that's super fascinating. And another aspect of this that we can jump into if you want to now is the fact of like double use cards.
Yeah.
Because that is something that brings so much uniqueness that you just don't find in a ton of other deck builders, because it's like, if I have the right things pop up and I see a double use card, that could very easily sort of shape how I'm going to play the game because of how powerful those cards can be. Because as Jason said, when you're playing this, you're drawing, and what you draw is going to determine what your turn looks like, as a traditional deck builder would have. But there's not just, I'm trying to purchase cards to get the most points or whatever it may be. You also have to actively be moving on the setup. So if you want to explain sort of or dive into that double use card idea.
Yeah, for sure. And we kind of highlight when we talk about the resources are, but when you think about, if you've played Dominion, basically you're playing a card that lets you do things, but it's just play another card, draw a card. It's all card based, and I'm buying another card, right? So that's what you're doing in Dominion. But with Clank, you have the traditional, I get to buy a card. And there will be a lot of the cards will have words on them that say add more Clank, take Clank away, get more coins, like the traditional words on the card, like Dominion, and you get to do something or get something. But then it also has those symbols. So it essentially lets you do three different things. Some cards will let you do three different things. Some will have everything on there. The skill to buy something, the sword to fight a monster, and the boots to actually move around. Those cards aren't as common, but those are the cards you hit hard and you're going to love when you get them. And so it's such a unique mechanism. Like Robbie said, putting that board in there changed. It just like opened up almost endless possibilities for deck building, because we're so used to playing a card, or even in Star Wars, the deck building game, it's a dueling game. I'm playing a card to attack somebody and they're playing a card to attack me. So many of those games are like that. Fantasy Realms is essentially like, not Fantasy Realms, but Star Realms is essentially like that. But now you have a board in which you're moving a character down through that board, moving your meeple down through there, and you're choosing which path to take. And you're choosing which thing to do. If I go down this path, I have to fight a monster or I get hurt. Or if I go down this path, I can go buy something. Go down this path, I get an artifact, which is the goal of the game, is actually get an artifact. They go from 5 points to 30 points and leave the cave. Not leave the cave, get from underground. The board shows a clear above ground, underground, and then outside the cave. So the fact that it gives you, now you have to think about these other things. We didn't say at the beginning, but basically this is probably the heaviest game we featured as a primary game because there's so many things going on. and the diversity of cards that you have in there. Not a heavy game, but it's a lighter midweight game, but it's definitely a midweight game because there's so many things you have to think about. Even for the gameplay, I love to say gameplay is easy in that you just play a card and do something, but that card could fight a monster, or that card could go through the dungeon, or that card could make Clank. Clank are these cubes you put in that eventually goes into a bag, and when the dragon attacks, you pull out that Clank, which are just cubes, and each time your colored Clank comes out, you get hit. Or you can use, based on the words, the text of that card, it does something else. So you have to think about, to really grok it and do well, there's all these different things you have to think about. But I love that because there's all these different things you have to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime that you are, like, I think for games that we've kind of worked through and talked through so far, the simplistic action is what we've kind of driven, especially for newer players. But sometimes, yeah, you give it a chance. And this is one that you can really kind of pick and choose what parts of the game you really want to be involved with. Because, like, if you want to go a route that has you slaying monsters and things like that, you're going to be drafting cards and trying to buy cards that allow you to do that, which is going to rack up points, things like that. But you can also, like, when I did it, anytime that there is like an end goal, there's almost a time limit type deal. I know we talked about this in Ticket to Ride, but I love to push that envelope. Like, I love to be the one to end the game type deal. And so when I played, they explained to me, like, if you don't get out by the time that this dragon attacks the castle, you lose 20 points. And most often, you do not win the game if you don't get out. Like, so tough to do. And I was like, okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to be a little sneaky fast thief, and I'm about to draft all these boots, and I am just sprinting down in there, and I'm going to grab my artifact, and I don't care if it's the cheapest or like the lowest point artifact or what. I'm going to grab that, and then I'm going to hightail it out there and end the game. And that was my goal. And then I started going, and then I had to adapt because I had enough boots to get me in, but then I was stuck. And I had to, like, get some other stuff to make things happen. So it's really cool to see a game that kind of forces you into adaptability as it goes. Man, so fascinating. Now, one other thing about this, like, the game, is there is some hidden information, right, that, like, gets revealed as you go. Like, there will be like a cell or something that has, like, hidden artifacts inside, or hidden pieces. Yeah,
there are major secrets and minor secrets. So we haven't really talked about the board, so it's a good time to talk a little bit more on the board. So the way that there's basically, when you look at the board, there are spots that you move into, and there's a line from one spot to the next. Some is just a straight line. Some is a line that shows 2 feet, which means you have to use 2 boots. Some is a line that shows a monster, or maybe 2 monsters. Some have a key, which a key you have to buy later on, or then some are one direction, like you can only go one way on it. And so when you're moving through those spaces, some of those rooms have what's called minor secrets, which are basically token-wise a little circle with a question on it. So you know when you go in there, you're going to get something good. All the secrets are good. Could be a boot, could be a heart to take away damage later on, could be just straight up coins. And then there are major secrets as well in other rooms that are the hidden information. And it stays hidden. When you pull it, you can keep it hidden. If it's an egg, you have to show it, because if you're stealing eggs from the dragon, it starts moving up and you have to pull more Clank. But there is some hidden information on that for sure as you're going down to choose which path you want to do. There's also these unique spaces called ice caves that you can't, once you move into them, you can't move out of them except for a few special abilities you have. So even if you have 3 boots and you're one away, if you go in that cave, you're in that cave until your next turn, which is that variability of what path you want to take and what cards you want to build up for what you want to do. Robbie, I just lost your sound if you can hear me.
Oh, yeah. No, there we go. There we go. Okay. Hey. I muted it because I was typing something in the other, like, to look something up, and it was like, oh, I muted myself. So don't worry. I'm still here. I'm still here. And I think when you, like, hear this board, one thing that I appreciate is I do think that this board is very appropriately sized, because I remember when I first looked at it and, like, playing this game, I was a little overwhelmed with, oh no, how are we, like I'm going to have so many feet in order, like boots, to get to where I want to go in this game. But it does, like the beginning, the top, the above ground level, you can traverse it pretty quickly. You can move around as well as you want. But it's like the deeper you dive into the cave, they've balanced it so well in terms of if you dive deeper into the cave, you have to have a more robust deck sitting in front of you.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that I really like is because as you gain cards, you're going to end up with points and things like that you gather to help your overall becoming the greatest thief. And this is another game where I have to brag on Jason's son because Ryder is truly the best player that I've ever played with when it comes down to like turn analysis to see like the points and how they're going to shake out. So this is a game that I feel like it shines in pushing people past AP. Now, granted, maybe it's because when I played with the four of us, none of us really are AP. Like
Right.
We struggle with AP. So I'd be curious, how does this handle? Have you played this with folks that have a little more AP issue? And does the smaller hand kind of help guide that?
The AP comes into play when they're buying their cards. 1,000, like my favorite saying tonight, 100%, 1,000%. AP comes into play when buying cards, even among my lovely wife, who doesn't really have AP, but sometimes she's like, well, do I buy this? Do I buy this? Because you have a 6-card row of cards that change every time you buy it. Then you also have 3 cards you can always buy. One has a boot and 2 buying power. One has 2 swords, as well as one that's just 7 points, and they cost different amounts. And there's also a goblin out you can always fight. So the AP doesn't too often come into play unless they're really good at drawing more cards, right? If you build a deck that draws more cards and you're getting to play more cards, well, that's going to slow down an AP player. But on principle, the game play, not too slow. The game purchasing, because I'm being farcical here for my viewers. You could be like,
yeah.
Now, sometimes it's great because of the 6 cards, there's 6 points, 5. They cost 6, they cost 5, they cost 5, they cost 4, and there's one that costs 2. And you can only afford the one that costs 2. So sometimes that row is perfect because you just can't hem and haw because there literally is only 1 or 2 cards you can play. But that's where it comes into play. That's the long answer to a short question, is that it's really in the buying the cards is the challenge, the place where people may get stuck with that analysis process of not knowing which way to do, because there's such a wide deck of cards. And for newer players who don't always have a mindset of like, oh, I want to get a deck that builds more decks. When I played with Elizabeth the other day, because of the way the cards came out, I bought cards that let me draw cards. And so I was just flying, which is great. And I won, but I was flying through my deck over and over and over. And I knew, okay, that's what they gave me at the beginning to talk about what kind of gave you. Let's see where that goes. Kind of like Wingspan as well. Sometimes you just got to go down the path that you're given at the beginning if you want a chance to win. You can't usually pivot hardcore in the middle. And so for those who know how to play it, so.
Yeah. So you talk about it at 2, talk about it at 4. I can definitely see a world that this is most enjoyable with 3 or 4. If you were, and this is something that we haven't really done in a previous episode, but I think would be intriguing because you know a lot of games. For the 2-player version, I know it doesn't hit as well with 2 players. Are there any adjustments that if you were looking at it that you would be like, I might change this or this to help make the 2-player, like if you could add a Collins House rule to try to get this to the table more, what kind of addition might you make for the 2-player version? Because I know we have a lot of 2-player listeners out there.
The biggest thing I would do, and this isn't uncommon for games in which you're buying cards, is having the ability to wipe the row. And you can understand that as well, because in a 2-player game, those cards just don't go through as fast. Now, you always, the cards that we talked about, they're always available. They cost 2 and they cost 3. And pretty much every single hand, you'll be able to buy one of those almost every single time. So that's a good thing. It's not that you ever can't buy cards, but in a 2-player game, and that's what happened to Liz and I, there was a bunch of 5s and 6s out early. and they were stuck there for a while. And it turned out okay, but you're almost playing two independent games going down two different paths. So the biggest thing I would do is change having a way to wipe the cards, whether that's an action, whether it happens every 3 turns. I don't know how you do it, how you gamify it. In the Clank, you just remove a certain number of artifacts the less players there are, so there's less artifacts, and I just removed the 2 top artifacts just to make us have to go a little further down. But it was like the 5 and 7 pointer. Neither one of us were going to go for that anyway, not in a 2-player game. So but yeah, being able to wiping rows of cards that just sit there stagnant, we all could agree with it'd be good to be able to wipe those things in some games from time to time.
Yeah, because I even feel that way about like Wingspan. Is like sometimes if I'm not building a wetlands engine or something that causes me to draw a lot of cards, it's like those first couple rounds you're stuck with what's in front of you, which can make the game totally drag on. I think that is like a big perk when I think about, because this may be our first sort of double dip into we've done something else in this genre of game.
Yeah.
But like we've done this mechanic, but obviously it didn't have a board with it as well. And so for some people that could be, maybe you don't like Dominion because of the fact that it's all out there and nothing changes. Like you're just, okay, for the next 30 minutes, buckle up. This is what we have. Could be a really nice refresher. Now, it's a side note here in the show notes, but Clank Legacy. Yeah. We haven't talked about a Legacy game. When I'm coming up, we're starting our first Legacy game.
That's correct.
And this will be my first ever like true Legacy game. So I'm stoked for it. But talk about like sort of what does Clank Legacy, if people are familiar with Clank, sell them on Clank Legacy or vice versa.
Yep. Oh, for sure. So a legacy game, and we've kind of touched on ever so slightly legacy games, but some games are legacy games and they're meant to be played one time through. And that the in-game condition is usually a unique game to you with unique rules and unique board. So that and the same is for Clank Legacy. Now we haven't replayed it as Clank Legacy, but in Clank Legacy, you are opening new rules to put in the rule book, and you are taking actions to put new paths on the board. You're naming locations. You're flipping the board from one side to the next based on the scenario you're in. And Clank Legacy is also attached to Acquisitions Incorporated, which is a RPG or something like that. So there's a whole really, really fun narrative-based story to it that you read at the beginning. And when certain things happen, it says, pull out this card or go to this page and read this aspect. And then you have to make a decision. And that decision could bring a cool card into the game, or it could bring a bad card in the game. It could reward you or punish you based on how you want to do that. Not uncommon. That's the way most legacy games are. And so legacy games are fun like that. And Clank, because Clank is just a fun game in general, but the fact that it has such a cool, fun, laughable story that goes along with it. Pandemic Legacy, you're trying to save the world, crazy things happen. It's still fun, but Clank Legacy has that real fun aspect to it. And it's considered by board game reviewers, right? People who play a lot of games, Clank routinely gets the top of their favorite legacy game. Often, these are folks who already liked Clank, but it's the story that goes along with it and the decisions they get to make, because it becomes this big board that is two-sided. And yeah, legacy games are fun. We played through multiple ones, and like Robbie said, we're going to do Charterstone when he comes up from Stonemaier Games. So, I
have one more piece that I want to discuss. If you're like, yeah. And then obviously open it up for anything else. But yeah. I want to talk about this rush that you get when it comes to it being a racing game to get out.
Yeah.
Because we've talked about a racing game that literally revolves around running around the track, driving around the track. And how it's done there, I think, is really clever in terms of the whole. In Downforce, everyone's moving everyone, which is a fascinating concept in itself. But I'll tell you, this is a game that it's really cool, and I personally enjoyed, because part of why I also was like, okay, I've got to end this game is I've got to rush through, and I've got to make sure that I get out. I've got to make sure that I get out. because as soon as you hear, if you get trapped underground, you're dead. Like you're just done. So you're like, well, that ain't going to be me. That ain't going to be me. And I remember watching and being so impressed by all 3 Collins family members because I'm sweating from the get-go. Like, I've got to get in there. I've got to get this artifact. I may be able to push, but I think I'm going to have to go for this easier one up top. Like, okay. And trying to push. And sure enough, I look over and like Ryder and Jason are just diving into the pits of this dungeon. Like, you know what? Super casual. I'm feeling really comfortable down here. It's so nice. Jason's like, I think I'm going to go to the market. I'm going to pick up this card. And you know what? That's going to allow me to go here. And at no point does anyone else at this table look stressed. But from the get-go, I'm like, that's why I got to have all the feet because it ain't happening to me. It ain't happening to me. So it's if you end up playing this game, I will warn you, it's not as hard to get out as you think it may be. Now, I don't want to like lure you into false sense because I'm sure, Jason, you've played with people that have not gotten out and it's been tough. But it's so fascinating. Is that like, as someone who's taught Clank to more people, is that like, oh man, Robbie was just super silly about this one? Or do you find that a lot of people when they first play kind of overvalue that I've got to get out aspect of it?
I think most people, I think people undervalue it, as odd as that sounds, right? I think because you realize that was such a key thing, but I think because they don't realize the importance of that, right? If that makes sense, right? Because even when I play, it's always this in my mind. Do I rush? Do I push my luck or not? Because this is essentially a push your luck game in many ways. The deck building game, a movement game, but it's also a push your luck because, and I don't know if we really laid it out, but it's essentially the first person who gets out of the cave essentially initiates the end of the game. And what will happen is because you play until the first person comes out on that person's next turn, they're just going to pull Clank. They're going to pull cubes out of a bag. And each successive turn, they're going to pull 1 extra cube out of the bag to either try to kill you, or once you get through the 4th time, I think they do it 4 times or 3 times. And after the 3rd or 4th time, the castle collapses. And as long as you've got above ground, but you're still in the castle, you don't die. You just don't get the 20 points. So that's what we're talking about in the whole, at least need to get out from underneath the ground. We have played where people have gotten caught down there and killed. So it can be, what Robbie's referring to, it can be a race game. You could, if you wanted to, you could rush down, grab an artifact, rush out, and like, I'm just going to see to try to kill you guys, if that's what you want to do. Haven't played a game like that because we all we're greedy people who want to get as much as we can to push our luck as much as possible. But if I played this game more, there's no doubt I would rush to the 5-point win, head out, and just see who's willing to try, right? Who's willing to try to push their luck for that. But you are not wrong in that it has to be on your mind, because even when I play with Elizabeth in 2-player, I was like, do I push it? Do I not push it? And I just barely got out. I literally would have lost on my very next turn. And I just had one boot enough to get out. And then she pulled the cubes to see what happened. And sure enough, I would have died. Now, if you die above ground, you still get to count your points. If you die below ground, same concept. You're still thematically, when the castle collapses, you die in it, but you still get to count your points. If you ever die underneath the ground, you don't. And so I would have died on my very next turn. So I had 1 boot to spare because I pushed it so much, because I had so many boots and I had so many things. Oh, I can do this. And I was just picking this up and picking that up and picking this minor secret here and a major secret there and just going out of my way to get stuff. And so you are right to make sure you're thinking about, do I get out there? Because 20 points is 20 points. I mean, this is a game that, it's I looked at our scores when we played. Ryder won with 94 and you had 75. So that 70 to 90 range, a little over 100 is where you're looking at. And that can be the difference. If you got out, it's 103. If you didn't get out, it's 83. Well, that could be the difference in you winning or losing the game if you're trying to do that.
Yeah. And like I said, my strategy when I played it was, I thought I was going to try to pull that off, and I did not pull it off very well. And so I was like, I wanted to get out there because as soon as I saw that they were all diving deep, I was like, oh, I could trap them underneath here. Maybe maybe they're not ready for someone to do this. And that to me is like beautiful replayability. The fact that the cards you're going to see, because you're not going to see the whole deck of like card options when you play. So every replayability through the roof. The theme, like I don't know. Have we talked about like why it's called like, cause you add Clank, and like, have we talked about like what the thematic of why it's called Clank
Yeah,
is?
I guess we haven't, right? Because I keep referring to Clank and pulling cubes out of a bag, but we haven't talked about why it's actually called Clank. The idea of why it's called Clank is because it's medieval times. You're going into the dungeon to get an artifact, so you're wearing, an iron suit, and so you're making noise. You're clanking. So each of us your starting deck has a stumble card that all it does is give you +1 clank. And so when you do that, you have to put Clank on a space on the board. And whenever something happens that causes a dragon attack, all the Clank that are there go into the bag. The bag starts with 24 black pieces, which are dragon pieces. And if you ever pull out the black pieces, no attacks happen. But every other color cube that comes out, you basically lose a heart. You have 10 hearts at the bottom of the board. And you can get those hearts back during the game. So it's not the end of the world to lose a heart early, but that's how you're making Clank. And so often cards that are really nice to play may say, oh, you get 2 Clank, but you get to do 2 boots and skip a crystal cave this time. Some of them, hey, pull back 2 Clank on that. So Elizabeth was really great at not making Clank, and I was bad at making a ton of Clank. And I it's full sin. So that's why it's called Clank. And that's why it's such a key thing in the game, because so many things that happen in that. And dragon attacks, another fun thing. So dragon attacks happen whenever you pick up a piece of artifact, the dragon knows you've stole some of his things, so it attacks, i.e. you're pulling cubes out of a bag. If you find one of its eggs as a minor secret, it's one of the dragon's golden eggs. The dragon gets upset and attacks. But the dragon also attacks as you're revealing cards from the deck. You're revealing mostly cards that can help you, companions, items, other people to walk along with you. But sometimes you reveal monsters. And if it has a certain symbol on there, you have to do a monster attack at that moment as well. And so like a monster attack could randomly happen when you don't expect it. And there's nothing you can do about that. It's literally just Clank coming out. But if you haven't played your cubes right and you start doing the math towards the end of the game, like, okay, I have 5 hearts left and I have 7 cubes in the bag. I could die on this turn. Like literally, we've never seen somebody pull 5 blues, but they could pull 5 blues out and you could die right now. So I love that on the edge of your seat. And you hit the nail on the head that the replayability, and there's even 2 boards. There's 2 sides of the board, not 2 boards. There's one board, but there are actually 2 sides. One where the markets are all together and one where there's markets spread over the board and the artifacts at different spaces is warded. It's a little harder, quote unquote, is what that side of the board is. But you have two sides of the board, as well as I could like a stack of cards that big for our viewers, like that you will never go through in a single game. Even a 4-player game, shedding cards, there's no way you're getting through that deck. So,
yeah. Well, Jason, do you want to dive into cookies?
Yeah, let's do it.
Or I want to try. I'm not trying to rush the cookies. I'm looking at the
look at the show notes. I'll point this out too. So this is full disclosure. When you get into heavier games, unless you find them on sale, the full price for Clank is $50. Heavy price. Totally acknowledge that. This is a game. If you know you like deck building, you like that mechanism, and you want to raise the notch up a little, turn to 11, maybe as the cool kids like to say. Clank can be it because it gives you so much more variety to what you can do. It plays fine at 2 players. It plays great at 3 players, plays fine at 4 players. Any of those player counts within it are great. It even has an expansion called Adventuring Potter that gives you asymmetric powers that are way, way cool. Like it actually takes a player count up to 6 players. I don't think I'd play this game with 6 players because I think it'd go a little long with that for sure. But the asymmetric powers are just super cool, the different things you can do. But the cost, fully acknowledge, $50 is a lot, but that's the normal full price for it. But I we wouldn't put it on here if we wouldn't recommend it as a game. If it sounds like you would like it, then it could be a good Christmas present. Could be a good, middle of summer present, whatever you want to do.
Oh, a little Christmas in July present.
Yeah, we like it.
So, y'all, I'll go ahead and dive in, Jason. And that for me, this is a chocolate chip cookie. And I will put it as a chocolate chip cookie simply because I've not had the time with it. If you guys gathered, this is definitely the game that we've played that I'm quote the least familiar with of all the ones we've played so far. But that's not me saying like, oh, it's a bad game. That's not me saying, it's a chocolate chip cookie. It's right up there. And I'm someone that loves deck building. Deck building is a component, a tableau builder, like anything where I can slowly have more onus in what I want to accomplish on the board, but also you get to pit strategies against other players who have similar options available to them. And so you get to have that vibe going of the game. I love how deck builders work in terms of I draw my 5 cards. And if I really want to go crazy, like I've never played a game that has a lot of cards that cycling is not important. Cycling meaning I'm going through the deck. And so if you can build a good cycling deck, like it sounds like Jason did in his 2-player game this week, like it's really tough to beat that. I think that's really fantastic. But it also, I like the randomness of the cards that are going to come out. And I think it scratches a very, very different itch than Dominion in terms of they're both deck builders, similar concept there, but that's kind of where the similarities like have to stop, is we use one mechanism that is the exact same. So if you think deck building sounds cool, but you weren't really that big a fan of Dominion, I like that we have this option. I agree with Jason. The board, so cool. I love having the board and moving through. I think it adds such a cool component to all of it. The theming's really great. It checks a lot of boxes for me. Truly, the reason that I can't put it as a double doozy is just raw time with the game to see, does my enamor hold over time with it? And I just, trying to be honest in my reviews. But Jason, you've had a little more time to digest it. So where's this at for you?
Yeah. So this is, I feel like this every, it's some are tougher than others. And this is one where it's because I know there's other things that go to the game. I know there's a legacy game. There's an in-space version that's very similar. And there's the expansion that takes this game up. If I didn't know of those things and just had Clank, it would definitely be a double doozy. So the challenge is a chocolate chip without those things. I think it's still a double doozy for me. And I know that's 3 weeks in a row with double doozy. We probably not kind of address that. I don't mean to always keep doing that, but I truly love Clank. And when I got it out, we talked about it when Jamie was on the episode. I love deck building games, playing cards that do stuff, playing multi-use cards that do multiple things, and then all these cards with the text on there let us do different things. I love Clank. I could play it whenever we do teach it. We don't teach it with Adventuring Party. We don't teach it with the asymmetric powers because that would just be way too overwhelming, even for hardcore gamers. Learn the basics of the game, then go from there. But the deck is so large. I love the push your luck nature. I don't mind push your luck. I don't like chance. I don't like dice rolling, but I like push your luck things like Quedlinburg. Bag building, deck building, very similar things. The push your luck nature of what's going to come out. It's definitely a chocolate chip doozy for me. It's one that when I got it out, I'm like, man, I really wish there was an app. I don't think there's an app for this. If there was an app for this, I would just play to see what I could do. And there may be an app, but I don't think there is one out there. So it's definitely a double doozy for me.
Dude, my favorite part about this chat, or I say chat as if we're live streaming this right now. My favorite part about this, listeners, is that you can tell how much he loves it. Because at one point, Jason, I will say that you said it's definitely a chocolate chip doozy for me. So I'm like, my man is
double doozy.
Guys, it's so good in Jason's mind. It doesn't just take up the top spot; it takes them both.
Yes, exactly.
And so, truly, it is one. Like we were talking about it, it was like I remember so many details about this game because I really did enjoy it, and it's so important for even how other games have been developed. And like it has this idea of those double cards, like double use cards or something. When we're thinking about designing a game, that's something we would want to incorporate. And I feel like any time that you play a game that you're like, that mechanism was so cool, so unique, whatever it may be, that you almost just want to see it carried into more places. Fascinating to me. I mean, I like, full disclosure, I have a Kickstarter that I've done for like an expansion that came out for Veiled Fate that we've talked about. But I also, Jason, IV Studios or 4 Studios, I think it's IV Studios. They have another game called Fractured Sky.
Yep.
That has another like hidden element to it where you have like these like magnetic ships that you're like covering tokens and moving them out there accordingly. And I'm telling you, it's got like 7 days left to back it. while I'm sitting here, and there's a very, very real chance that I have that backed as well. So it just confirms that I'm going to have to come up in 2025 even more because I'm going to have all these new games to play. So, Jason, any final remarks, man, as we're wrapping it up?
No, man, we played Clank last summer, and I knew we'd eventually put it on an episode, and it was the right time. I'm glad we got to talk about it. I'm glad we were able to talk about it, had a good time. Next week, you're going to be here. This time next week, you'll be here. So we'll be playing games next week. I'm excited.
Looking forward to it. And I want to look up before we head out, give an update on our reviews, y'all, because we did not give an update last week. That was on me. But just as a reminder for those of you who are listening, we do give away. We have 2 copies of Quacks, and part of me is like, Jason, do we need to lower the threshold? But you know what? We're going to hold strong. We have 2 copies of Quacks of Quedlinburg that we want to give away for reviews. We're at 28 reviews on Spotify, and we've been there for a little bit. So I'm just saying, I see the numbers. I see that people are listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, it would mean the world to us if you would be willing to support us by dropping a review. It's free to you, especially on Spotify. It is super, super easy to do because you just got to click a little button. So if you listen on Spotify, we would really appreciate that review. And then Bards of the Board on Apple Podcasts, because if we get to 50 reviews on Spotify, that's a giveaway. And then on Apple Podcasts, we're at 23. So 23, our last review was, it looks like the last one that wrote notes with it was April 14th. So it's been some time. Hope you guys, that was by Dr. Morello. So looking forward to hopefully more reviews. And we thank you for your listening regardless, even if you don't drop a review. I feel like I'm not trying to hound the people, Jason?
Yeah, for sure. It's that delicate balance of like, we want you to do that, but we also want you to enjoy hanging out and listen to us talk for sure. Speaking of that, we mentioned it last week. Our next episode will be a top 10 list. So that we have some ideas what we can do. But let us know if there's any specific ones you want to hear. Someone specifically asked about our top 10 of all time. That's definitely a list we'll eventually do. Maybe not this early in the life of the podcast. Maybe sometime this year. But we definitely will do a top 10 of all time at that moment at some point in the podcast life. So if there's any other top 10s you'd like us to talk about or give our top 10 favorite fill in your blank type of game, let us know in the comments.
Absolutely. Well, y'all, we hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and we will, Jason, I'll see you in a week, and or I guess I'll see you when this is live, and everyone else will see you for episode 20, a little top 10 list. Here we go. Or a list of sorts. Oh, well, here we go.
It's all good.